I am super proud to call myself a recruiter. I enjoy, every part of the job. I'm still super hands-on, sourcing, basically interviewing people. It is. I'm proud of it, man. And I think largely we should be proud as an industry. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a number of kind of rounds of redundancies. We've seen people losing their jobs because companies are kind of scaling back. So I think first and foremost, we need to be kind of acknowledge there are people when we think about these functions. But equally, in that context, we need to be thinking about how can we invest in these people? If the structure of the function is going to change, how do we continue to kind of upskill and change the scope of these particular roles and profiles? My week is full of talking to founders in different industry sectors. And I think the one thing that surprises me that consistently comes up is their challenge around hiring capability. So how do they train their teams, their leaders to be better at hiring? And that includes obviously being better at interviewing. It just seems to be a kind of recurrent theme. And I just wonder why.
Glenn, absolute pleasure to have you on the show, buddy.
Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. Thanks for the invite, Sam.
Yeah, man. From one podcaster to another, right? It's a clash, a crossover episode.
It's a takeover.
The backdrop. Yeah, this is it. And we've matched the backdrops as well. We're both going with this kind of jungle theme. Lots of plants, lots of greenery going on. But tell me, man, for the people that don't know you, let's just get a short introduction, who you are, what you do, and then we'll dive in from there.
Sounds cool. Yeah. So I'm Glenn Martin. I am the founder of Nevermind the Job Spec. So that is a talent solutions consultancy. Park that to one side. People can check my LinkedIn profile for that. Who am I? I'm the guy that basically came back from the Glastonbury Festival, had zero job prospects, zero job. And I basically stumbled initially, but I've now spent 20 years in the people and talent space. And I love it. I do. I absolutely love it. I am super proud to call myself a recruiter. I enjoy, every part of the job. I'm still super hands-on, sourcing, basically interviewing people. It is. I'm proud of it, man. And I think largely we should be proud as an industry. And then alongside that, as you mentioned, do podcast hosting, event speaking, workshops. So as we were chatting about in the green room, and kindly, as I said, a shout out to James Whitelock, a Renaissance man is how I'm packaging myself now, as opposed to a generalist.
And I know, people always go, oh yeah, fell into recruitment. I like the way that you fell out of Glastonbury into recruitment. Like that's the segue that we all needed. That's the one we were all looking for.
100%. Well, just on that, I mean, I came back from the Glastonbury Festival. Pal of mine was already really in recruitment, and he sort of said to me, look, give me a year, I'll give you a job. You need to shave your beard, cut your hair, and wear a suit. I was like, I'll guarantee you a year, and I'll do one of those things, which is wear a suit. And like I say, in that first year, I was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is me. But then I kind of reframed the reference of it. And ultimately, people and talent is about people. It's about human beings. And that I know I can do incredibly well in terms of creating experiences that people really feel valued in terms of their search for a new opportunity, or a client feel really proud around the people that they're hiring. And that, for me, that's the essence of kind of people and talent.
Yeah, special. And what we're going to do is we're going to move away from people and talent and instantly go into our 2025 crystal balling moment. And therefore, it's inevitable. It is probably a legal requirement of me to ask you about thoughts on AI. But let's start with what we think is coming in 2025, because I think it's a great place to be. But I'm going to guess that it's going to be a 2-letter piece to start with. But let's start there because it's inevitable, right? Tell them, what's your thoughts? What's your thumb-ing, the big one?
Exactly. Sam, to be fair, if you don't mention AI on your podcast, you're going to be seen as a Luddite, right? I mean, it's quite literally a situation where people are like, it's not mentioned in AI. They clearly, they're not up on current trends. But I think for me, it starts with your AI literacy. So us as human beings within the kind of people and talent space, right? What is our AI literacy level? So yes, we kind of understand Gen AI tools. Yes, we're using them, but can we critically assess them? And that for me is the differentiator in terms of your AI literacy. It's like, can you critically assess the tools, the software that you will be, as a people and talent leader, you will be responsible for purchasing, right? Your leadership are giving you a budget to purchase these tools. Yes, you can use them. Yes, you can understand them, but can you critically assess them? And can you critically assess them in the context of the outcome outcomes you want now and in the future? Are these scalable investments? Otherwise, my thought process is you're probably making a decision based on an incredibly potent and powerful sales pitch, and you're making your decision on, yeah, I want that in my business. That critical assessment piece is really key for me. And I'll tell you why, in so much as I was at an event back end of the summer. And I just did a really quick the actual room was full of people and talent leaders. And I was just like, hey, honestly, how many of you are actually using Gen AI tools day to day at the moment in your role? And about 70% of them weren't. So then I flipped the narrative. I was like, okay, so how many of you have got leadership teams that are asking you to kind of market map and assess, the kind of AI tools and software available with a view that you're going to be then tasked to purchase that? And the majority of them were like, yeah, that's us as well. So it's just that AI literacy connects the two. It's like, you've got this responsibility, you've got this power and this budget. So make sure that you're making really well-informed decisions around the purchases you make. And I think you'll find more value in that as well, because it's kind of one of those things where the kind of conversation around the tooling and software becomes deeper and more meaningful. And actually, it becomes more interesting in terms of how you can fit that into a kind of almost holistic sort of suite of tools and software. So yeah, one for me is more AI literacy first, then go buy the tools and software.
Yeah. And I think that potent and powerful sales pitch, right? One which we'd hope to drive, as an organization with an AI-led tool. But I think the piece which I see coming on that same thread is almost this shift from the moment that AI is mentioned, organizations getting their back up and thinking, right, okay, this is going to be a big process. There's a lot of understanding, responsibility that we've got to go through, to being in a more informed position, being able to make those decisions on the basis of actually, what is it actually doing? Is it taking a human, is it removing a human decision, or is it aiding a human decision? And I think that's the big distinction in terms of where that risk sits versus a robot doing a job that a human should versus aiding and supporting and being that co-pilot. So I think, yeah, definitely kind of echoed that. And I think that's going to be an important paradigm shift. And then the other piece, never mind that job spec, because here's the thing. A lot of the time when people are saying they're using Gen AI every day, what are they doing? They're posting, their job spec in, and they're saying improve it or write a job spec for this position, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think that counts as using generative AI. We had tools that have done that. Hennyway's done that for years and years and years, right? There's tons of tools out there. What are you doing to actually drive in? Is that second piece? And is it driving impact when you're doing that assessment? Are you being bamboozled or is it driving impact?
Yeah, I think there's been that kind of quick adoption of Gen AI tools for essentially, kind of productivity gains. So to your point, low hanging fruit, right? Job description writing, job advert writing. You might, probably generate some kind of talent playbooks or basic playbooks, etc. But where's the value? The value is genuinely in that kind of real impact, strategic impact, business impact, human impact. You know what I mean? It's kind of and how can you use these tools to as almost feedback loops for learning? That's where I think the value will be going forward. And that kind of takes you into that conversation thread around the kind of co-pilot. But, back to your point, right? You guys have been in the industry now for over 10 years. I mean, your 10-year anniversary was just a month past, right? And you've seen the industry evolve. You have an innate understanding of what this industry requires, when it requires it, and you're shaping your kind of product and proposition to really deliver against that. I see a lot of kind of new AI rec tech driven companies kind of spinning out, which I understand that, but it takes time to really understand the pace of change in this industry and then sell to that particular, that particular ICP, that particular, ideal customer profile. You know what I mean? So whilst we're seeing a lot of opportunities for change, I think the industry as a whole changes at a certain cadence and pace, and you have to kind of be prepared for that, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. And it's almost like this, what we need to avoid just in general, and it's not just isolated to recruitment, it's just a reskinning of what's available and what somebody else can just do within ChatGPT. I think it's what sort of data can you put into it? How can you make it different? And some of the fastest growing businesses in the App Store in the last year have literally just been ChatGPT in an app form, dragging it across that has like identical functionality, which is just amazing to see. Like people, to be fair to them, like outside of our industry, are making serious money out of just dragging and dropping and replacing. And I think that kind of point, that impacts, that co-pilot, how do you see this impacting recruitment teams, individuals? Like what do you see as that step change? Again, like we need to commentate on this as much as possible. So what's your view? How do you see this affecting like team structures, individuals?
I mean, it's a really interesting and emotive question, because essentially what you're indicating there is going to be change to some degree in the current structure of a talent acquisition and kind of people team. Now that strikes an emotive chord, because certainly over the last couple of years, we've seen a number of kind of rounds of redundancies. We've seen people losing their jobs because companies are kind of scaling back. So I think first and foremost, we need to be kind of acknowledge that there are people when we think about these functions. But equally, in that context, we need to be thinking about how can we invest in these people? If the structure of the function is going to change, how do we continue to kind of upskill and change the scope of these particular roles and profiles? I think my thoughts on it are that change is definitely inevitable. I think that kind of structure around certainly the kind of sourcing layer will change. That particular role will change and evolve. I think it's already doing that now, and that's one of the great things about it. But it's evolving to adopt AI very quickly and utilize the tooling. So you kind of almost got sourcing morphing into a bit more of prompt engineering, and I think that will continue to evolve. And I think that particular type of role profile will be very happy with that, because they're innately interested in technology and technology adoption. I think that's going to be a very smooth transition. I think the challenge may come in terms of...
I love that as well. Just before you move, sourcing, morphing into prompt engineering, that's just, I think you've captured it perfectly with us. And so sorry to break you, Flo, but I think it's just perfect, and I think that will be the smoothest transition, that team.
I agree, man. I can see it being the smoothest transition. I think the challenge will be then, okay, what sits, kind of around that? So in terms of obviously, what does that mean for almost like talent leads, that kind of talent manager layer, talent partner layer. And then ultimately, what does that mean for the profile of kind of talent leaders and people leaders, right? I mean, ultimately, the first thing I think of is, well, you've kind of got to get that AI literacy, that technology mindset. You've got to really work on your understanding of that to be able to interpret the value from that kind of sourcing team. So I think there's going to be some change in that. I think that there will be some change around what that kind of role looks like. So does talent leadership, talent partnering become more of a data analysis layer? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to this, but I'm kind of thinking that does that then become a bit more of a data analysis and data interpretation layer? And then in terms of the kind of talent leader or people leader, what does that mean for them? Does that actually free them up more to be more strategic? Because we've had conversations around, and I think there's been a number of debates around, people leaders, talent leaders having a seat at the table, but then them not being seen particularly as strategic. Has that been a result of the current structure of the talent team? And now actually with this kind of increased technology adoption, more rich data available, does that actually provide a foundation for them to be more strategic and have more time to really focus on that strategic side of their role? Again, I don't know, but I could see that as a happy transition, actually. Each part and component of that team changing to support the other and actually move it more towards the greater value add that it should be and continues to be, as opposed to, people still questioning, what is the value of kind of people and talent? Is it still a service? I think it moves more towards higher value, greater partnership, more strategic thinking. And I think that can only be a really good thing for us collectively.
Yeah, for sure. And it should be able to help augment and be able to bring you to that level of understanding and impact within the organization in a completely different way. And just be that enabler, not just from a time perspective, but from that knowledge perspective, the ability to gather and analyze and understand data and lead from the front and think about people decisions, team structures, etc. There's so much that can happen there at that top level. And I think for that middle level as well, it's like, how do you partner with the business units that you are serving observing. Like, how do you get that additional time? How do you get that additional time with teams? And increasingly, you know, as parts of the process become easier, as parts of the process have less friction, well, in turn, there's less friction for candidates. And it's like automated messaging just creates noise. That's the challenge. So then how do you cut through the noise? So then it's like a different skill set. It's that constant evolution. And that's not really changed that much in, like, I think your sourcing example was a great one at the start. It's like, that's been the journey of sourcing anyway. It's that you have to get better and better and better and better because everybody's raising their game. And it's all still that, you know, I'm not going to use the phrase, but it's that battle for talent. Let's say that, you know, if you want the absolute top tier individuals and the right people for your organization, they're going to be in high demand across the board. And it's still, you know, thinking about how you engage. Does it free you up to be more at events, more engaging people face to face? Like, I think we're going to see a real reversion to that as well. Like,
100%.
as you touch upon those kind of time savings.
100%. And just one thing, I think I'd kind of describe that structure as a bit more of a hierarchy. I see it more as intersecting circles, you know what I mean? Almost like that kind of Venn diagram type scenario where each overlap has value for each particular, you know, kind of leader, the kind of partners, you know, the strategic lead in the sourcing. And I think to your point, as kind of technology and, you know, we can adopt, as long as you can invest, you can continue to invest and compete. I think the differentiator then will be the capability of that team from a human perspective, their ability to, you know, sort of identify opportunities, their ability to be creative, their ability to kind of use these tools more creatively than perhaps the initial function they were bought and purchased for. So that, I think, is going to be a really competitive edge for any business. So we're not saying that technology is going to almost, you know, kind of the need to reduce the headcount. Actually, you're just going to be looking for a different type of profile. And actually, again, that's a step forward. That's not a step back. So I can see the harmonization of utilizing technology for better human experiences and better outcomes.
And I think you touched on it perfectly there again. Like, it's human experience. Again, all of this stuff, not just in our industry, but across the board, it's enabling things to move faster. It's enabling to create a better, more personalized experience than what we've already been seeing. And like, you know, personalization is already off the charts when it comes to, you know, consumer advertising, right? And how focused it can be. And, you know, it knows what you want before you want it sometimes, or it certainly feels like that, you know, with things that I end up buying. But what do you see that's not going to change, or what hasn't changed? What's been your frustration, right? This is one of the things, and it's always this time of year, right? Whether you go to a conference, whether you're listening to a podcast, whether you're reading a blog post or LinkedIn post, whatever, we're just coming up to that cusp where it's going to be things I've achieved, things I want to achieve, things I see happening, etc., etc., etc. The echo chamber is about to begin. I don't know when this will be released. Maybe this will be mid echo chamber. But like, from the echo chamber of yesteryear, what are the things that are still just niggling away at you in the background? You're thinking, you know, why is this not happened? Why is this not changed that maybe you thought might have done before?
I mean, it's a really good question. I think less frustration, more surprise. So my kind of day-to-day, my week-to-week, talking to founders. You know, I talk to founders on the podcast. I blog about my founder journey. My week is full of talking to founders in different industry sectors. And I think the one thing that surprises me that consistently comes up is their challenge around hiring capability. So how do they train their teams, their leaders, to be better at hiring? And that includes obviously being better at interviewing. It just seems to be a kind of recurrent theme. And I just wonder why. Is it because obviously they go through pre-seed to maybe a Series A kind of level, and just hiring in is very reactive, so therefore it's very specific to that need, and they've managed to kind of, you know, somehow hire somebody in that matches that need. But then they get to a certain level and they're like, typically post Series A, and they're like, we need to do something about hiring. It's almost as if they've realized that actually hiring's been okay. They've had some hits and, you know, wins and losses, but for the next, you know, stage of their growth, should I say, they need to really fix hiring. And so they come back to this internal assessment of, you know, how do we hire? Are we hiring efficiently? You know, kind of what training's needed, etc. So I think I'm just surprised that we're still finding that as a challenge. And I think, how do we, I mean, it's because sometimes it's so individualized, right? Depending on the company and the stage you're at. But I think there's a real opportunity, and I haven't seen this, so forgive my naivety if there is a reputable platform out there, but I haven't seen a solution platform or play or something that addresses that need, that says you have hiring manager, interview training needs, this is the solution. This is what you do. If you do this, you get everybody through this particular course or on this platform, it will give you an X percentage increasing kind of capability. Because I think sometimes hiring and interviewing is, whether you want to admit it or not, is something that you need to do enough of to get to a capability level. And I think that's probably where the disconnect is. It's kind of almost like, okay, I'll go on this platform. I've never hired or interviewed before. I go on this platform. It kind of essentially, I get a certificate or training element at the end of it. That's great, but it's theory. The reality is you need to do it. And I think just being in interviews and conducting interviews and conducting and managing hiring processes, you build your experience. But what's missing then is the feedback loop to almost assess your capability level. I mean, I worked it out the other day, kind of loosely, and I think I conducted over 12,800 hours of interviewing through my career, which is a pretty significant number. And I think
that's for as well. That's not even including, you're having a conversation with someone and you're making your own judgments. Yeah. No, but yes. That's a fair journey.
Yeah. And I think it's through that, I've always implemented a kind of feedback and assessment loop of myself. I've always said with each interview, with each hiring process, I need to get better and I need to implement a process whereby I can assess myself and provide that feedback and that learning loop. So I think that it surprised me we're still challenging on that. But then at the same token, I guess I've just answered my own question by saying that actually you need to build up that kind of capability over time, but you do need that retrospective and that feedback loop to get better. Just the amount of time itself is not enough. You do need to continue to create a learning loop.
Yeah, and it's almost like, how can you make sure you anchor that as a business, right? Because essentially that phase which you're speaking about often means that you're going from founder-led to like department head-led, where they're starting then to think about hiring into their own teams, and there's a little bit more flexibility, and then you need that focus, etc. And then, maybe that core of what people were looking for, that culture, that capability isn't even across the team. They might have been promoted. There might have been ICs who've got no experience doing it. And I think there are some tools, out there. Social Talent just did a really great update on what they're doing in this space, far more kind of conversational, like build upon it. There's obviously tools like MetaView, Poetry, etc., which are all about that kind of, recruiter enablement, understanding feedback loop. But it doesn't take away from that storied experience that someone's got. Whether that's within your business, can you pick somebody that can be in every single interview process, regardless of team, that kind of bar raiser methodology, but maybe in a smaller setting where you've got just a person or two people that are involved in all the interviews so they can build that muscle, or, lean on externals, like lean on people that can support you, that have been on that journey, that have hired lots of people into similar businesses, similar stages. And there's no weakness there necessarily when you're in that stage. It's like those hires are so important. And every individual makes a difference when you're going through that stage, and you don't realize it, until you're in that moment, and then you realize what an effect it can have. Start to scale that up. So enterprise, whilst there's still that challenge and that finesse needs to be there, if there isn't 100% finesse all the way across the board, even though if I have a damaging impact, it's diluted through the scale versus that, the intimacy of a smaller group. So yeah, I love that. And I think still not enough innovation within that space. And I think it's that complement through Copilot plus people again, where it can make us faster to get to that. It can add impact, but may not necessarily solve it in 2025. But who knows? Closing thoughts. I think would love to just, give a shout out to what you're doing. Where can people see you next? What's coming up on your roadmap? Where can people hear more from Glenn?
Okay, cool, man. Well, listen, I mean, there's the Never Mind the Job Spec podcast, and that is focused on founder journeys, human-centered founder journeys. That comes out every month. I've just recorded 3 really great conversations in the last week. So there's some real bangers in there as well. So I'm excited to release those. There's a YouTube channel. I'll stick all the links in the comments when this goes live. And then it's interesting you asked that question. Just launched an event in collaboration with Katrina Collier and Eileen Abdullah, and it's called Brain Camp, and it is quite literally the cognitive hits, so high intensity training event for people and talent leaders, and that's dropping in January. And that's a full day of kind of immersive workshops, 2 tracks, people and talent track, with 2 fantastic panels focused on innovation and AI and building human skills. So super excited for that as well. So those are the 2 kind of key things. And then obviously across the socials, you'll be able to find me. But yeah, I'm really super excited for Brain Camp. It's going to be wicked. London first. and we're already discussing other locations.
Awesome. And I love it as well. Like, you're just coining soundbite after soundbite throughout this. But I love that, like, HIT program for cognitive health, that kind of setup, jumping between things like, what they're called battle rope. I don't know the mental equivalent of that is, but I want to see it.
That's it, Sam. It's got to feel like you rock up to the event, you put down your mat, and you're in it. It's really, so these immersive workshops are meant to make you feel like you've had a mental workout. Because I think we've all been to a lot of the kind of, show and tell, sit and watch events, which are fantastic, by the way, don't get me wrong. We collectively, Katrina, Eileen and I, just wanted something just a little bit different, a little bit more high intensity, a little bit more kind of immersive. It's almost like a cognitive hit for the brain.
Well, there we go. That is a bombshell to end on. Absolute pleasure having you on, buddy. And yeah, see you soon.
Really appreciate it, Sam. Thanks, man.